introduce today Tate Fall. Tate currently serves as the Director of Elections for Cobb County. She has previously served as Deputy Director of Elections for Arlington County in Virginia, a Communications Specialist for the United States Election Assistance Commission, a Voting Rights Advocate for Alabama Disabilities Advocacy Program. Tate has her BS degree in Rehabilitation and Disability Studies, a Master of Public Administration, a graduate certificate in Election Administration, all from Auburn University. In addition to her professional career, Tate also volunteers as a National Advisory Consultant to Arnold Air Society and Silver Wings, which is an affiliate of the Air Force ROTC with over 3,000 members nationwide. In her free time, Tate enjoys spending time with friends and family, crafting, catching up on the latest Bravo show, and going on walks with her husband Wesley and two golden retrievers, Elle and Gunner. Help me welcome Tate.
I'm going to take this off because this is the only way I'll get any steps in today. So I'm going to move around a little bit. Thank you for that introduction. My name is Tate Fall. I'm the Director of Elections for Cobb County. I've been here since last December, and it's been such a pleasure to be here. We came from Northern Virginia, but I met my husband at Auburn, and so our families are all in Alabama. War Eagle. I don't get a lot of those around here, so thank you. It's been the best 6 years of my life there. I wanted to stay and get my master's so I could get 2 more football seasons, which of course just were disappointments. So, it's how it is. We're having a really, really rough year, but I'm really excited to be with y'all today. I'm in what I do because of service. My dad was in the Air Force. That's why I work with Air Force ROTC cadets and civilians that are adjacent to them, because that's how my parents raised me, is to give back to our community. My dad was a member of Kiwanis growing up in Montgomery, Alabama, so I remember going to the state fair there because they were the major sponsors for that, so that was a fun childhood memory, so I love coming and speaking with Kiwanis, and so it's an honor to be here. I'm going to talk a little bit about just general election information, and then talking at the end about how to volunteer to be a poll worker. I'm sure there are a lot of questions, so please feel free to raise your hand and ask a question as we're going through, because every slide is going to be kind of a different flavor of election, and so I want to make sure to answer your all's questions. I may say that I'm going to get to it in another slide, but we will get to it. So with that, we already talked about everything about me, so I'll skip over that. How many registered voters do y'all think we have here in Cobb County?
400,000.
500,000?
400.
400? 650? I see we're covering the Price is Right rules here. So as of this morning, we have a total of 591,136 registered voters in Cobb County. 513,623 are active voters. 77,513 are inactive. So what does that mean, right? We get a lot of questions about this. So an inactive voter, typically someone becomes inactive because we mailed them something and it got returned to us. That's the most common thing. So maybe you submitted a change of address form. I talked to a voter over the summer who was marked as inactive because she had submitted a temporary change of address because she was summering in France. I don't know what that means, but I love that for her. And so I talked her through what that means and how she can still get her ballot. And so if you are an inactive voter, you can still vote. That's the most important thing. Sometimes it happens because you live in an apartment building and your postal worker doesn't like you, so they just return to sender all of their postcards, right? So sometimes it's something just inconspicuous like that. Other times it could be because we think you moved, whether within Cobb, outside of Cobb, but within Georgia, or outside of the state of Georgia. So we send every summer confirmation notices to make sure that you're registered where you should be registered, okay? So if you are on the inactive list for 2 federal election cycles, which is 4 years, right? We have a federal election every even year here in Georgia. Then after those 4 years of being inactive, if there's no contact, you never update your voter registration, you never show up to vote, then you roll off the voter roll. Okay, so that's when we would remove you as a voter. You don't get removed as soon as you become inactive. We send you a notice and we give you the opportunity to update your information. Or if you have moved, you can opt in to cancel your voter registration. Okay, voter registration is something that I've talked a lot more about recently than I had in previous years. And so I want to kind of talk a little bit about what that looks like, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions. So when you submit your voter registration form, it isn't automatically accepted, right? It goes through lots of checks and balances to make sure that you are who you say you are and that you're eligible to vote. So let's say you submit your voter registration, right? It's past the voter registration deadline, so we're not accepting any new voter registrations now. That'll open back up after the election is over. So you submit your voter registration and we key it in, a human keys it in, and you go into a pending status, okay? And while you're in that pending status, another registrar comes back and audits everything that's been keyed to make sure it's accurate. So you stay pending until we check for 4 main things, right? We're checking with DDS to make sure you're a citizen, okay? So we check for citizenship status. We check with state records to make sure you haven't committed a felony, that you're not a felon that causes your rights to be removed. We check with the probate judge to make sure that you haven't been ruled mentally incompetent and that you still have your right to vote. And we check that you're 18, right? So you can register to vote when you're 17 and a half in Georgia, so we check that you're 17 and a half. Those are the 4 main things that we check for, right? So if DDS cannot confirm your citizenship status, you go into what's called pending citizenship. Okay, and we let you know that your registration is pending citizenship. And you come to our office, or you can email us your proof of citizenship. So your birth certificate, your naturalization papers, whatever that looks like for you, and then that makes you an active voter. You can do that with their office or at the polling place. If you get to the polling place and it shows your pending citizenship, you can provide your citizenship documentation to that poll worker, and they'll allow you to vote, okay? And so that's a little bit about voter registration. Here's a little bit about overview of this election that we have coming up in 19 days. I'm not counting. So it's a general election, okay? We have federal, state, local offices and questions on the ballot. So there's 3 state questions and the 1 local referendum, right? We all know about MSPLOST. Where election day you have to vote at your assigned polling place. If it's early voting, advanced in-person voting, we have 12 sites. We started voting Tuesday. If you're a Cobb County voter, you can go to any of those 12 sites. Doesn't matter. So we have a wait time map on our website, which is really helpful because a lot of people like to vote on Saturday because they'll go run their errands and check that off that list. So I encourage you to check that wait time map and maybe plan to go to this Target over here instead of the Target you were going to go to run your errands so you can get in and out as quickly as possible. Okay, election day is Tuesday, November 5th. Like I said, AIP started Tuesday. We go through November 1st, Friday, November 1st. Yes, ma'am.
I'm having trouble understanding the questions, and I've asked some people locally, and they didn't know what it was either. So I brought it today to see if anyone understood what the questions were talking about.
People that
Yes.
listen don't understand.
Yes.
I'm
So
trying to figure it out before I go to vote.
So we, on our website, you can go to cobbcountyelections.org, cobbelections.org, or cobbcounty.org/elections. Either one will take you to the right place. And we have, under Election Day, we have the consolidated sample ballot, the list of disqualified electors who were on there, disqualified candidates, and then the certified write-ins. And there's also the explainer on the 3 state questions. So we can only provide what the Secretary of State provides to us. We can't provide any supplemental information on those questions. So that's posted on our website. And then MSPLOST information, you'd have to do the research on the local MSPLOST. So we try to avoid any appearance of partisanship. So that's why we really encourage voters to do your own research, and we only provide information that's been given to us by the Secretary of State.
Okay, and that's not my voter page, it's a different website?
Yeah, so the My Voter page isn't going to have the explainer on there. I'm going to talk about the My Voter page in a minute, but our website, we have the handout posted where you can read through it. Yes, great question. Absentee by mail, those applications are due Friday, October 25th. That's the last day to get your absentee by mail application in. So make sure you do that as soon as you can. We've received over 30,000 absentee by mail applications. For context, in May, we mailed 5,000 ballots. So a much larger increase. We've also seen much larger turnout so far than we've seen in all the elections, I think, this year combined. So it's been very busy. Monday, we did about 21,600 voters across Cobb County. I was kind of expecting it to taper off yesterday, and it didn't. We did about 20,500 voters. When I left my office this morning at 11:15, before I stopped one more place before coming here, we had done 48,000 voters across Cobb County, including all 3 days and then this morning. So we're busy. The lines have gone down. Now we're in the swing of things. We have our motion back. So the lines are definitely a lot shorter than they were that first morning when we kind of got started. And so we're really grateful for all the voters coming out. Everyone's been so kind, and it's been great to see so many voters come through the door. And then the voter registration deadline was Monday, October 7th, so that has passed. And so no new registrations can be accepted since voting has started. All right, how often do you have to apply to vote by mail in the state of Georgia?
Each time?
Every election.
Each time. Oh, you guys are really informed. That's right. So in Georgia, unless you are over the age of 65 or you're a disabled voter, you have to apply every single election. Okay? If you are over the age of 65 or you're a disabled voter, you can apply once per year. So you can apply at the beginning of the year. You have to opt in, and then you can get your ballots for the rest of the year. So that means you apply every election. That means if you want a runoff ballot for maybe a runoff election that we may or may not have, you have to apply for that now. You don't automatically get a runoff ballot because you voted in the general or you voted in the previous election that caused that runoff, okay? So college students, make sure we're reminding them because they don't remember to wash their underwear. So let's remind them to apply, right?
What's that date on the absentee ballots? Is that the mail-by date or is that the receipt-by date?
So for absentee ballots, we have to receive them by 7 p.m. on election day. That includes postmarks. So we have to have them in our hands by 7 p.m. on election day. The only ballots we can receive later are UOCAVA ballots. Those are our uniformed overseas citizen ballots. They have until Friday 5 p.m. to get back to us. So that's a federal law, so they have a little bit extra time. They also can apply on an annual basis. They can also opt in to have their ballots emailed to them. So they can email their ballots, they print it out, they mark it, they mail it back to us with the same oath that you guys would do on your absentee envelope that you send back your ballot with. You can apply via fax. Yes, we have a fax. Someone had to teach me how to use it, but we have one. Okay, we can accept those applications by mail, by email, or through the portal. That's on the NVP website, which I'll talk about also in a second.
While we're reading, I would like to make a comment. I would not vote absentee ballot because I get some of my bills after they're due, and I would be afraid that my ballot would never get to me or get back to you.
That's a great point. So we've obviously had some issues with USPS this year. We have seen an improvement in the return. As of Monday, our first day when we closed Tuesday, the first day of early voting when we closed polls, we had received about 800 ballots back already. So we're seeing an improvement. I always encourage voters, if you want to vote absentee by mail, a lot of people like having the time to sit down in their home and mark their ballot and not feel rushed, return it in a drop box, okay? So we have drop boxes I'm going to show in a little bit, and I'll talk about them, but that way you know that we've gotten it, okay? So that's the best way, if you really want to vote in your home, to fill out that envelope and mark your ballot and then return it in a drop box or to our office, okay? When is the last day to vote advanced in person? I've already said it, so who is listening? Friday, November 1st, yes. So the Friday before Election Day. We have 12 locations. The bolded locations that are here are our Sunday voting locations. So at all 12 locations, we're open Monday through Saturday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And then for Sunday, we're open at 5 locations from noon to 5 p.m. on both Sundays. And then everywhere where you see an asterisk, that's a drop box location. So a lot of laws have changed surrounding drop boxes since 2020. right? 2020 was wild, y'all. It was crazy, right? COVID, I had to keep reminding my staff, you guys, we got through COVID. We can do anything. We have to remember that, right? So one of the big changes we've seen is drop boxes. So before, drop boxes were outside, they were open 24/7. Right now, the law requires us to have drop boxes inside early voting locations. We can have one at our office and then an additional one per 100,000 voters. So that's why we have 6 total, one at the office and then an additional 5. And they can only be open when voting is going on. So the way that works is they're inside the voting room, right? You come to our office, it's inside our lobby. And then all the other locations are inside the voting space. And 2 workers that are working early voting, they gather all those ballots out at the end of the night when they close at 7 p.m. or 5 p.m. on Sunday. And they gather all those ballots, and then they sign an affidavit that says that that drop box is emptied, and that they have locked it, and that it cannot be opened. And then the next morning, 2 different workers come in, and they sign an affidavit that the drop box was still locked, that it was empty, and that they unlocked it for voters to start depositing ballots at the start, okay? So that's a really big change that we've seen. We also now have to record those drop boxes when they're locked. That way the next morning if they come in, and I don't know how they would get that box open because they have to pry it open, but if they find any ballots in there the next morning, we could review the security footage to see what happened. So a lot of security in place to protect those drop boxes and protect the integrity of those ballots that are going in the drop box. Okay, what time do polls open on election day? 7. That's right, 7 a.m. We're open 7 to 7. As we've already talked about, check your MVP for your polling place information. We did have a couple changes. We're sending out postcards this week, so if you have a polling place that was affected, you'll know about it right away. That's the website to access your MVP, which I'll talk about more what's on there in a little bit. We're also, by the end of the week, we're going to drop our voter information flyers. So we're doing 1 per registered voter household. So my house only get 1 between me and my husband. We're not both going to get 1. Trying to be fiscally responsible. So we're going to send those out, and that's going to have information on absentee by mail, early voting, and election day. And it's going to have your polling place printed on there as well. So you'll have another reminder of where your polling place is. This is a list of voter ID that we accept. So when you vote in person, you have to provide photo ID, right? So we have a pretty long list: Georgia driver's license, valid ID cards issued by any other government entity, United States passport, an ID card containing a photo by any branch, department, agency of the United States government, a valid United States military ID card, or a valid tribal ID card. So all of those forms of ID have to have your photo on them, and that poll worker is checking to make sure your face matches the photo that's on your driver's license. And so that's for both early voting and election day. So make sure you have your ID before you leave. All right, how do we become a poll worker? So we're very lucky here in Cobb that we actually closed the poll worker application about 3 weeks ago because we received thousands and thousands of applicants. So for an election this size, we'll staff about 2,200 total poll workers across our 148 polling sites, and we were staffed very quickly. The community really showed up and stepped up and were willing to volunteer, which a lot of them, unfortunately, we don't have 9,000 spots. So some people aren't able to. But once we reopen the application next year, we'll have that on our website, so you can submit the application there. You would be contacted by an area supervisor, and you're assigned to a polling place. You attend training. You have to be trained before every election in Georgia. If there's a runoff, you don't have to come back for training, but you do have to be trained prior to working. You do have to assist with setup. That's the day before election day, and then you work. You have to be there on election day at 6 a.m. In an election like this, you could be at your polling place till 9, 10, 11 p.m. Just depends on how big your polling place is and how long it takes you guys to close up, as well as if you have a line. Because if you're in line when polls close at 7 p.m., you can still vote. So they stay open until everyone in that line has voted. They put a poll worker at the end of that line, marking the end of the line, and they make sure everyone that was in line can vote. And it's the same for early voting, okay? And you do get paid. You can opt out, but you do get paid. It's not a lot of money. Clerks, regular poll workers make about $170. You do get paid for training. And then up to managers, they're at $250 for the 1 day. Early voting, they get paid hourly, so it's a little bit different rate. But we were fully staffed with early voting back in August. I mean, we had just a lot of people. We always have a lot of people that'll say, I'll do one more presidential. So I'm sure we'll have a good bit of turnover after this election, but we are really, really blessed to be fully staffed for this election and the early voting. So like I said, check your MVP. Your MVP has all the AIP sites, Dropbox locations, the times that they're open. If you did apply for an absentee by mail ballot, you can opt in to track your ballot. You can get texts and emails with updates on the status of your ballot. You can find your polling place, and you can see your sample ballot. So remember, you can't have your phone in the polling place with you in the voting booth. So you can see your sample ballot, you can mark it, you can print it off, you can make notes on it, you can take that with you in the voting booth to make sure that you feel prepared, you've done your research, and you understand the questions, and then you can make your notes that you have there. That's the website for MVP. It's a really great resource that not a lot of people know about. So with that, I'd love to take any questions anyone has.
We have time for 3 questions. If you would stand, please.
Okay, you two are definitely first, and then I'll let the other people fight it out. So, you go first.
So the Judge McBurney ruling, we thought we were going to have to hand count ballots. Now we're not. Can you confirm that? And had you had to hand count ballots, what kind of extra effort, time, and resources would that have required?
I knew I was going to get asked about this. So the hand count rule, we did receive guidance after Judge McBurney's ruling from the Secretary of State's office that it was in fact struck down. So we will not be hand counting ballots in the polling place on election night. But let me tell you what Cobb has done for at least the last 18 years, the entire time the previous director was here. When those ballots come back, the next day we have election staff, people who work on our staff, paid county employees, they take those ballots by each batch and they put them through a paper counter. And they make sure that the number of ballots that were counted match the number that's on the tape, right? Which is the purpose of the hand count. So we make sure that we have the right number of ballots. And that's how we actually caught an inconsistency in May in a precinct because of the write-in candidates. When you submit a ballot with a write-in on it, it gets diverted into a separate part of the bucket because we have to count those write-ins and allot those votes to the certified write-in candidates. Well, we had a new poll manager who thought that that meant those 12 ballots weren't scanned, so he rescanned them. So we had 12 less ballots than what the tape said. And we did about a day and a half of Blue's Clues, and we finally figured out how we were 12 ballots short, and we saw it was the write-in, so we rescanned the entire batch, and then that's the results that we ended up uploading. That's the only time we've seen an inconsistency between the number of ballots and what was on the tape, but we have a process that works for us with the volume of ballots that we see, and we will continue to do that the day after the election. Because this has become such a hot topic, I'm going to work with our board to make that an open process for party observers and media to be there to see this is how Cobb does it, this is how we make sure the numbers are correct. So we'll have more information once I can get more info from my board on what that'll look like the day after the election.
Vanessa?
But had you had to have hand count them, what kind of resources would that have required?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, my crystal ball has not been working since Auburn lost the national championship, and so it's tough for a county our size because they added a provision to the rule that said if you have more than 750 ballots, then that poll manager can come back the next day and count those ballots with staff. My poll managers have jobs, they're caregivers, but they also didn't want to count 3,000 ballots after working a 14-hour day. They were concerned that they weren't going to get the same number because they worked a 14-hour day, and they were concerned what that meant for them. So we were working through a plan on what that was going to look like. We always follow the law. I always tell people that's my job. I follow the law. I do whatever that book tells me to do. And so we were working through what that was going to look like for us, both for polling places that wanted to count on election night and what it was going to look like in our office the next day. And so we thought about bringing in outside people to help assist with the closing while the manager and the 2 sworn poll officers started that counting process. So that's kind of what we thought about doing at some of our larger precincts if they wanted to stay, but we thought the majority of our people would want to come in the next day after they got a little bit of rest.
Vanessa, you.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Tate, for this presentation. I wanted to ask specifically about college students who may not, because I noticed a student ID was not a valid identification. Not all students have an access to having a passport, for instance, and a lot of teens nowadays don't want to drive. So they don't have a driver's license. So I wanted to ask you, what is another type of ID, for instance, if you have a student down at Georgia Tech or at the AUC Center who may not have a driver's license or an identification or a passport, and all they have is their student ID? Thank you.
Absolutely, great question. So you can get a non-driver ID from DDS, or you can come to our office and get a voter ID. So if you don't have any form of ID, we see this a lot with our older voters too, who haven't or aren't driving anymore. Their driver's license becomes expired and they want to get something more current. We offer free voter IDs at our office, and all counties do that. All county offices do that. So if they're not a Cobb County voter, they can go to their local registrar and do that there.
Good to know.
Last question, Dan.
Tate, thanks for what you do for our county. You've got one of the more difficult jobs, particularly right now. Can you tell us, coming from Virginia to Cobb less than a year ago, differences, any surprises?
I'm telling you, I know why this job was vacant. I had lunch with the previous director. She's retired. Every time I call her, she's on a cruise, and I'm just like, Janine, help a girl out over here. Pretty much everything from Virginia and Georgia are different. In Virginia, we voted hand-marked paper ballots. In Virginia, I had 45 days of early voting. In Virginia, all the jurisdictions could get whatever voting equipment they wanted. We didn't have statewide contracts. It was very different. Understanding, we had a state election board, but we didn't have a secretary of state. Understanding the role of the state election board here in Georgia with investigators and law enforcement officers that conduct investigations, that was a wake-up call. My second week on the job, I had to go to an SEB meeting for a case that happened 2 years before I got there, and I had to stand up and say, I have no idea what's going on, but I'm here, and I will do whatever you want me to do. So it's been a lot. It's been drinking from a fire hose, baptism by fire, but you know, like I said, I'm an Auburn fan. I've seen worse. I've been through worse, okay? And I'm so grateful. The team I have is phenomenal, and I show up every day for them. I show up every day for the voters, and I'm blessed to be able to lead them every day. Cobb is great. We can't wait to have a couple kids, raise them here. We want to be in Cobb for the rest of our lives till we retire. So we're really grateful to be able to. Thank you.
Tate, thank you so much for coming, taking your time and enlightening us about what you have to do to make sure our election runs smoothly. So in honor of you being here, we don't give you a plaque or a little trinket to put on your desk. We'll donate a book in your honor today it will go to Anderson Boys and Girls Club, and it happens to be called My First Election Day. So if we'll get you to sign it. So thank you again.